is Reggie Kray speaking. I would like to thank you all for being present this evening. Though I cannot be with you physically, I want you to know I am with you in spirit. I hope that you have a good night. God bless. Reggie Kray.
I'm glad they're 6 foot under, the best place they can be. They were two horrible bastards.
Every time I saw them, there was always a problem or something.
They wanted to be gangsters. They set out to be gangsters.
Ronnie and Reggie Kray, two of the most infamous criminals of all time. Legends. Their fame was built on a fearsome reputation and mythical celebrity-like status. But who were the real Krays? This film uncovers the truth from one of their own. True crime author and friend of the Krays, Bernard O'Mahony, offers unprecedented access to their trusted friends, loyal confidants, and most bitter enemies. Silences will be broken.
In his autobiography, Ronnie Kray bizarrely claimed that he and his brother were fucking untouchable. That was quite a statement to make from a man who was serving a life sentence with a recommendation that he spend a minimum of 30 years behind bars. For me, being in prison would suggest that Ronnie Kray and his brothers, Reggie and Charlie, were far from untouchable. But that statement was typical of the terrible twins, who controlled the East End of London from the mid-1950s until their arrest in May 1968. Drunk on power, their inflated egos ensured that they spent very little time here in the real world. This is the true story of Britain's most infamous family, the Krays. It is told by those that they trusted, those that carried out their bloody orders, and those that knew them best. Maureen Flanagan, former actress and one of Britain's first page 3 girls, met the Kray family when she was just 17.
1961. Well, London was buzzing, swinging 60s was just beginning, everything was changing, fashion, politics, we had the pill. Some women were going out to work, like me, and it was a very busy area, most respectful, and that's when I met the notorious Kray family.
When I was about 19, come out of prison, I was young then, I knew their father, and sometimes I'd go home with the Krays, with father, rather than them, and they were back from evacuation, Reggie and Ronnie. They was only about 9 years of age, and they used to call me Uncle Frank.
I met Charlie, the elder brother. He was the elder by 7 years from the twins. I met him first, found him most handsome and charming. Then he introduced me to his mother at their house in Valence Road. He said she wanted someone to come home and do her hair every week, rather than sit in a salon and be inundated with requests, which she always was. So along I went, I met this charming, lovely, kind, typical East End mother, who just happened to be the mother of the most notorious men in London. She couldn't sit in a hairdressing salon without someone saying, do you think Ronnie could speak to this one? We're having a little problem with this neighbour. Could Reggie come down and speak to them? The poor woman just couldn't go anywhere, so hence I went home to do the hair.
I used to go round the Krays' house as a friend, because how I met them, I saw this woman in Bethnal Green Road in shopping bags, and I said, old lady, can I give you a hand? She said, oh, would you, son? So anyway, she lived in Valence Road. I didn't know who she was. When I got to the doorstep, I went to give her the bag, said, come and have a cup of tea. I couldn't believe it. Two geezers in there, you couldn't tell them apart. That was Ronnie and Reggie.
I found Mrs. Kray, Violet, a wonderful child. I had an affinity with her the minute I met her. I knew I'd have a friend for life. Typical mother who loved and adored her 3 sons. I think Charlie got pushed out a little bit with her affection for the twins, and they were always demanding of her time. Mr. Kray, who I always called Mr. Kray, I never called Charles the whole years I met him, I found him quite a withdrawn, miserable man, but then he wasn't there very often, hence no authority, no fatherly authority in the house. When he came back, I mean, the boys, as they were growing, had taken over the house, and his word went for nothing. And in the early days, I mean, he was quite abusive to Violet. She told me this herself. And one day when he was being abusive to her, he didn't know Ronnie was in the house. I think Ronnie was about 17 then. And he was upstairs and he heard that he'd hit her. And he ran down the stairs and he had him up against the wall and said, if you touch our mother again, I'll kill you. And I basically think he definitely meant that.
Was there much between Ronnie or Reggie?
No, they were about same as most brothers, you know, they'd have their arguments and one thing now and again. But otherwise, they were okay, yeah.
OK is not how the other children of Bethnal Green remember the terrible twins. Those that somehow offended Ronnie and Reggie were beaten mercilessly. The twins' grandfather recognised their lust for violence and urged them to channel their vicious energy into the noble art of boxing. This is the famous Repton Boxing Club, where all three Kray brothers came to learn their trade. They were influenced by their grandfather, Cannonball Lee, himself a proficient boxer. We encouraged them to come to the club because he felt, and a lot of others felt, that they could have been professional boxers. They were good at fighting.
Well, I thought Reggie was a really good fighter. I think he could have been a champion.
I think this stemmed from being little boys. She always told me, Violet, they were fighting in the playground. They had to be the bosses of the play. She went round the school many times. She was called round to stop the fighting because they'd fight as one.
What used to happen was, started in the school playground, having little scraps, chinning people, and then after that, in the street, chinning people.
Then when they became boxers in their teenage years, that anger was taken out in the ring. That's why they always won their fights. Then Reggie had a fight with a policeman, which took his any chance of being a professional boxer away. So I think it was stemmed from maybe the grandfather, the famous boxer Cannonball Lee, which Reggie inherited the left hand punch from, and then later on his famous cigarette punch that he called it. But I don't think it was ever an act. I think they were destined from little boys to be leaders. She spoilt them terribly. What they wanted, they had, and then they grew up and they thought what they saw, what they wanted, they took.
Demanding, devious and dangerous, the twins did indeed commandeer whatever they wanted, whether it was money, material items or manpower.
It was a mixture of fear and respect. Respect because women and children, untouchable. Ordinary guys who went to work and that, untouchable. Any rows we had was only amongst ourselves. And if we hurt or killed one another, so what? And therefore, people did have a lot of respect, yeah.
Oh, they was violent, yeah. I mean, in their own little way, I suppose, they was violent, yeah. So was we, wasn't we? So, you know.
But that didn't worry you and your brother, no?
Never. I tell you that if they put me and my brother in a cell with them two, there's only two people coming out, that's me and my brother. Both of them, I mean, they was both no brains. What I would say, no brains, you know. They wanted to be gangsters. They set out to be gangsters. Used to read gangster magazine, gangster comics and things like that.
I was invited to go around the house one day and I went down there and they're all sitting, the twins and Charlie sitting there. And then Charlie stood up and he said, "Welcome to the firm," like some fucking board meeting. And he said, "We want you on our firm to earn money with us. Forget all them bank robberies and shit like that." And then they put me on a succession of doors in different clubs. So you become a face. They use you because you're a face. They know that people will respect when you're on the door. They go, "Oops, don't start fucking about in here. It's the firm belongs to the firm.
I was with them on and off for about 20 odd years.
What sort of work did you do for them?
I used to mainly drive them about and be with them in general, you know. I used to live with Reggie and Ronnie. All of us, 3 of us used to live there, 4 of us used to live there first. There was me, Ronnie, Ian Barry and Reggie. Ronnie would get up in the morning, yeah, and some mornings he'd come down, he'd be all happy, ha ha ha, and that morning he'd come down, sit in a chair and pull a face and he'd sit there and you couldn't talk to him. That's how he was. And if he was nice in the morning, he'd have a go at someone on the night, and if he was horrible in the morning, he'd be all happy on the night.
A lot of people ask me who was the dominant twin, and a lot of people really believe it was Ronnie. It may have come more like that as he got older. I don't think at the beginning, Mrs. Kray never told me that there was a dominant twin. They used to call them the 2 ones where they lived because, and I still believe they were 2 people, but in one person. As they grew older, and Ronnie's illness, he became a paranoid schizophrenic, which he was for the rest of his life, untreated. And when he went into his violent rages, I think, you know, there's only 2 people on earth that could stop him, and that was Violet Kray, his mother, and Reggie. So I think Reggie slipped into that role as pacifier and to look after him.
By 1956, Ronnie Kray had begun to display the early warning signs of someone suffering from mental illness. He shot a man for little or no reason and severely beat another, for which he was sentenced to 3 years imprisonment. On Christmas Day 1957, Ronnie's beloved Aunt Rose died and he suffered a complete breakdown. He was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and sent to Longgrove Asylum near Epsom in Surrey. Reggie saw this as an ideal opportunity to free his identical twin.
What decided me to get Ron away from Longgrove Nut House in Epsom was some of the stories he told me about the place. One day he was sitting there eating an apple and this nutter come along and smacked him in the eye, which he retaliated just because he was eating an apple, because the place was full of nutters. So Ron said, I've had enough of this place. So I decided to take him out there. Anyway, as Ron came into the room and sat down, I got a photograph album and made out that I was Ron, and he acted as though he was me. Ron went to get the tea and left me sitting there with my head buried in the photograph album as though I was him. Anyway, he'd been gone some time, and then the screw in charge of the ward turned around and says, he kept looking at me and he says, you pulled a flanker. Anyway, they eventually called the doctor, but they had to let me go. In the meantime, Ron had got in a car and was parked round the left of the gate outside. Anyway, he just drove away and he was free. It was quite exciting, really.
I stayed in Ronnie Kray's flat when he'd escaped from Epsom, the mental place.
Oh, right, yeah.
And he was holed up in his flat, and they gave me his flat to live in. And I've got my wife and kids over there. They went to school over there. And that's how I come to live in the East End and got to know the Kray family very well. I never trusted Reggie. I thought he sat on the fence and he would go whatever way suited him, whereas Ronnie was more, if he gave his word, he would stick to his word. He was the nuttiest one of the 2, and he was on this horse tranquiliser and knock a horse over, what he used to take, you know. But he needed that every day to keep himself, because he was manic depressive, you know. And he thought if people looked at him too long, he thinks they're going to attack him or something. You know, he was one of those very insecure people.
He was a very, very scary man. Believe me, I've met a lot of scary people, but Ronnie Kray was a very, very sick, psychopathical, schizophrenia, and manic depressive, all rolled in one word of his mouth. He meant everything he said.
He wasn't right in the head. He definitely wasn't right in the head.
After Ronnie had been returned to custody, an infamous landlord named Peter Rackman was approached by Reggie Kray, who demanded protection money from him. Rackman was well known for bullying and exploiting his tenants, but he was no match for Kray. In an effort to pacify his tormentor, Rackman offered to sell Reggie a West End nightclub for a nominal fee. Things went well initially, but then schizophrenic Ronnie was released.
I was there on the meeting when they took it over, but they took the East End to Knightsbridge. You know, all them ugly-looking bastards with their cuts down their faces and all that, and flat noses. And they should have left the club as it was and run it as without it, and just sat back and collected the debts that was owed. That's all they needed to do. But of course, they ruined the place like they ruined every fucking thing, you know. Anyway, every club they had, the business they had, they ruined it with the clientele they used to take down there.
When they walked into a pub or a club where I was often at, along here on the Grave Morris, in their nightclubs, there's that sort of sense of menace the minute he walked into the room. More so Ronnie, I'd see people laughing and having a good time 5 minutes before he walked through the door. The minute he walked through the door, that laughter stopped. The conversation dimmed. People were terrified that he would say, "Are you laughing at me?" And then he had that paranoid feeling that they were laughing at him, and then there'd be a bloodbath.
Random acts of violence were part and parcel of Ronnie Kray's disturbing world. A family friend named Lenny Hamilton suffered a terrifying ordeal after a dispute with a man whose father knew the Krays.
Andy come home and he said, "Len, Ronnie wants to see you up the club." I thought, well, I ain't done nothing to him, like, you know. And I was going in and out their house and that, like, as a friend. So I go up there, get a cab, black cab, and go up there. They show me in the kitchen, and Ronnie was standing with his back to the, I didn't know, but it was a gas stove. He sat me down in the chair. He said, "All right, Len?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "All right, you can go." I thought, "All right, what?" He said, "All right, you can go now." I thought, well, "What you got me up here for?" I'm thinking. Then he told two fellas to get hold of me, and they got hold of me, like, and that's when I see the pokers on the gas. He said, "Now I'm going to burn your fucking eyes out." And as he's coming towards me, someone shouted out, "No, Ron, not that." And he just stopped. As he walked away too, I said, "You can go now."
In July 1964, the Sunday Mirror published a story about Ronnie being involved in a sleazy sexual relationship with a Conservative politician named Lord Boothby. After the twins threatened the journalist involved and Boothby threatened to sue, the newspaper backed down. It sacked the editor, printed an apology and paid Boothby £40,000. Toby Von Judge, the son of a High Court judge and associate of the aristocracy, knew the allegations about Kray, Boothby and young men were true, and so he confronted the peer.
I said, "Tell me something. What sort of a man like you can come to somebody like Ronnie and demand your boys?" He said, "I beg your pardon." I said, "I've asked you a straightforward question, your lordship, or whatever you are. Is it only because of the boys you come to see Ronnie? Or is it just because he's your friend? Because I can't see someone like you as a Conservative peer knowing somebody like Ronnie Kray unless you're getting something out of it." And I said, "All the time you're behind people's backs being protected by this man." I said, "Put it this way, Ronnie, thank God for people like you who could look after people like him, because they would take his lordship away and throw him in a prison somewhere because homosexuality wasn't allowed in the 60s. "Oh, it's none of your concern." He kept on saying it was none of my concern, and this really got up my nose. I said, "It will be your concern when I tell my father and the Lord Chief Justice." And he said, "What do you mean you tell them?" I said, "I just say to them I'd met you and tell them what sort of a person you are. What are you doing with a person like Ronnie Kray?" And then Ronnie butted in. He said, Toby, that's enough. He's a friend. He does me favors. That's it. No more questions." So I left it at that. He left rather quickly.
Ronnie Kray and Lord Boothby were not the only ones enjoying the sexual revolution of the promiscuous swinging 60s. Freddie Foreman's brother George was having an affair with the wife of an East End villain named Jimmy Evans. When he learned of his wife's adultery, Evans and an associate named Tommy Ginger Marks decided to shoot George Foreman.
All I knew was someone come round to me and got the message that George was in hospital, in St Thomas's Hospital, and someone had shot him on his doorstep while he was having a meal with his wife and kids. Ginger knocked at the door, he went and answered the door, and then he asked for a Moody address, he said I didn't know who it was, and he shut the door and he went back to sit down and have something to eat, and then another knock on the door, he goes and answers the door again, and all the light had been taken out outside on the landing, and it's all pitch black, and then someone stepped out of the shadows with a shotgun and blasted him in the lower area, caught him in the top of the leg, and he hit the passage at the end of the passage. And next thing you know, he's in hospital with a big hole in his leg, and at point blank range, you see. If it'd been back a bit further, the shot it would have spread out and it would have done more damage. And to his personal part, but he was lucky in that respect. And of course, I'll go to the hospital, and the police stay on the bed, and they went and had a cigarette, and now over there, and he just whispered, Ginger Tom, and that's the only name I had. Well, the twins knew everyone in the East End, and so when I went to see the twins, they told me who Ginger Tom was, you know, and so that was Tommy Marks. And that's how I come to find. Then I found out through that who the other fellow was. I didn't know about the relationship he was having with this girl. I had no idea he'd been carrying on with somebody else's wife, you see. So that was something that was a shock to me. And naturally, I had to take revenge, you know.
So Freddie was always trying to track him down, but Ginger Marks was commonly called Gin. Jimmy Evans was commonly called Jim. So they pulled on him one day in Cheshire Street, and they ordered out Jim. They wanted Jimmy Evans, but Ginger Marks turned around thinking he'd called Gin. And they shot Ginger Marks, dragged him in the motor and whipped him off. And that was the last they saw of him.
Do you know what happened to his body?
No.
Somehow, amongst all of the bloodletting and hatred, Reggie Kray found love. Initially, his heart was stolen by a young man, but when he rejected his advances, Reggie accepted second best and started a relationship with the man's sister, a beautiful young girl named Frances Shay.
Reggie knew Frances, I think, from the age about 14, but first of all, he knew her brother. I mean, they were two good-looking kids, but basically, from a woman's point of view, I think the brother was even better looking than the sister. The brother looked like a very, very young Montgomery Cliff. That's who I can only think of. Beautiful, you know, and I think Reggie, who had tendencies to be as gay as his brother, I think really fancied the brother. I think at the very, very beginning, probably young teenage years, they were both bisexual. But then again, Ronnie, as Violet told me, Ronnie had girlfriends. He had two girlfriends that both were known to Violet, and both that he definitely slept with, but his preference then changed completely then. After, I think, about 16, 17 years of age, his preference was boys. Reggie, on the other hand, had had girlfriends, but definitely being bisexual, and I think probably would have had an affair with the brother first, had it been consented, but the brother didn't want to know. And then he'd met the sister, who was equally beautiful, and started this love affair. The mother and father, Mr. and Mrs. Shay, did not like him. They didn't want their daughter to be with them, but they persevered, and eventually she became his girlfriend. Although she had tendencies like mental health tendencies, she was on medication, she was nervous. The first time I met Frances, she was sort of with Reggie as they walked in the door. I thought, I'd been told she was pretty, quiet, quite vulnerable, timid, nervous, And that's exactly what I saw. And he would just put her there with Violet and say, I'll be back later. Even 5 minutes after he walked out the door, she'd look at the clock and say, what time do you think he'd be back? And he will be coming back for me. And fidgeting with the gloves. She wore these little white gloves, fidgeting, nervous. All she ever wanted to be was to be with him. At the beginning, of course, and he treated her like a princess. Ronnie hated that because it was somebody, at last, he'd found somebody, Reggie, that he really, really fell in love with. He was absolutely, he adored her. Treated her like a princess, gave her everything, delivered clothes to her house, shoes. She couldn't even go to a shop to pick a dress, like we could go. They were delivered there for her to choose, and Ronnie absolutely hated that. And he had no intentions, or so he thought at the time, to let this marriage go ahead, and he did everything in his power to stop this marriage. Why do you want to get married? You know, we're together. And it seemed though nobody could take Reggie away from him. Very jealous of Francis, he was. But eventually the marriage did take place. But he never liked Francis, ever, Ronnie.
"11 months after the wedding, Kray firm member Richard Hart was shot dead at Mr Smith's nightclub in South London. Eddie Richardson, Mad Frankie Fraser and other members of rival gang the Richardsons were involved. Ronnie Kray's moment had arrived. He was going to teach the Richardson gang and everybody else that they should not mess with him or his firm.
I don't know, it was sort of underlying rivalry. We never actually clashed in any way, you know. There was an animosity. It had a few little near fallouts in the West End at different clubs and things. What happened was the row. I mean, there was a fellow who I had 6 betting shops, you know, betting offices, and one of these young guys, he was only 20, Lenny Hamilton. He was a lovely kid, and the girls liked him because he's a good-looking boy, and he was in a club one night, at the Stalk Club, I think it was, yeah, and he got bashed up down in the toilets for no reason or other. They kicked the shit out of him. I find out that Eddie and Fraser and them had done, and the rest at the firm. So my brother George had the Red Salve Club up at Clapham Common, and they were all down there, and George rang me, he said, well, they're all downstairs. And so I went down there, and I was very angry, and I only went with one person, Ronnie King, and they was all in a group, and I went over and I pulled them. I pulled Eddie about it, and I stuck this 38 up his nostril, you know, up his nose. And I was shaking because I could have easily let it go, you know, because when you're angry, you shake, you tremble a little bit, you know. We had a little argument, fallout, and I said, well, now, that prize, if anybody, I just said, if that happens to anybody else, I said, you had the story, you kicked the dog, you kicked the master. I said, and that kid worked for me. I said, and he's going to hospital, and that made out it was nothing, but it wasn't nothing. It was a liberty, and I saw it that way, and then I said my piece, and then I walked out and I left.
Someone from up north, through Billy Hill actually, and he got in touch with Billy, and then he put us in touch to put a couple of people on the door in the club to, you know, so that's what we was going to do. We went over there and was unaware that other things had been going on, and people thought we was going over there to put it on them, when we wasn't at all. We were just going over there to feel the ground out and things like that.
I walked up to dig it out. I said, what you doing? He's gone, a Luger. I said, a Luger, it was a Luger. He said, Jim, it's going to be war tonight. He said, I said, Dick, don't be silly. Took the gun off him, put it in the girl's bag that I was with, right? Then boom, everything else happened. Then dig it out, somehow or other he got the gun.
Anyway, they had 2 guns. We never had no guns. So, and then one of them wanted to have a fight with me. We had a fight on the dance floor. right? I'd done him on the dance floor, set astride of him. I wanted to really punch his head through the fucking floorboard, to be quite honest. But I've been waiting to get shot in the back. My mate had already been shot in the arm, Harry Rawlins, blood come out, spurting out everywhere. So I'm waiting to get shot for beating him, to be honest. So I didn't go too strong. He's crying out, I've had enough, I've had enough. So I got up and left him. Then there was a bit of movement from outside. Someone tried to get outside, get out the back door, right? So they run out the back door. So everyone ran out the back door. And that's when Dickie Hart lost his gun. And he'd already shot Fraser with it and Harry Rawlins with it. It's quite a big 45, you know. And he finished up getting the gun and he got one from the gun, but he didn't survive it.
And all of a sudden the phone went. I went, hello, it's Ted. He went, Jim, Dickie Hart's dead, got killed. I said, oh, I'll see you in the morning. I thought, God, oh, that was it.
Eddie and Fraser and all the rest of the firm had been down there, and it kicked off. About 4 people had been shot, you know, shotguns and everything, and they'd been killed. The little fella, Dickie Hart, and he was the casualty.
Ronnie Jeffries got shot, I got shot, Fraser got shot, Harry Rawlins got shot. You know, I mean, it was a big lot of publicity, a lot of bad publicity as far as we're concerned about it.
Fraser likes to make out he did it, but he didn't do it at all, because they had to carry him out with his legs shattered. And of course, that was like an open warfare now. It was sort of, that was the beginning of all the trouble.
The night after Dickie Hart's murder, Ronnie Kray heard that George Cornell was drinking in the Blind Beggar pub. He summoned his friend Ian Barry, and as they entered the premises, Barry fired 2 shots into the ceiling. Ronnie saw Cornell at the bar, and as he approached him, Cornell said, "Look who's here." But Ronnie didn't answer. He pulled out a Luger and shot Cornell through the forehead. Cornell slumped forward and eventually fell to the floor, where he died moments later.
Georgie Cornell was from East London, and he'd gone over to South London to join up with the Richardson firm, and so they felt that he's just changed his loyalties from east to south, you know. I told Ronnie Kray afterwards, I said, you should never have done that, or gone in that pub. It's like their front room. They lived above it, they had their kids above it, and they'd shot, and Ian Barry shot shots in the ceiling, could have gone up and injured their family upstairs, you know what I mean? And it should never go in a person's house. Should have waited for Georgie Cornell to come out if they wanted to shoot him, and waited, he'd come out and got in his car or something, not in the pub in front of witnesses and other people and barmaids and everybody else. And I said it was a stupid thing to do. And they used to help the Krays. If they were short of money, they'd give them a few quid, you know? And it was a liberty what they'd done. And Georgie Cornell was all right. I knew him and his family, Olive and all their family from South. They was from South London. And they was nice people, you know, good people. And George was all right. I liked George. He was okay. He'd supposed to have insulted him, called him a fat puff or something like that. You know, I don't know what the truth of the matter was, but Ronnie Kray used to get the hump with people for very little reason, you know. He didn't need a lot of excuses to get the hump with people. And this was a bad thing about him because of his mental state, you know. He wasn't a well person, he wasn't well at all.
On the 12th of December 1966, Frank Mitchell was sprung from Dartmoor prison and brought to this flat on Barking Road.
Frank Mitchell was a product of the environment. He stole a bike when he was a little kid, and his father, instead of going round to the person's house and saying, look, my son's just nicked your boy's bike, here's his bike back, he didn't do that. he took him to the police station. He got the kid in juvenile court, and this was the beginning of Frank Mitchell's career as a criminal, really. And it was his father instigated it, really. And he had no confidence or trust in his own father. Where do you go from there, you know?
Mitchell started off when he was a 16-year-old kid. He stole a push bike. He got nicked for that. And then he went through the system, ball stall. If a screw said something to him, he chinned him, and that was it. And that followed him right through all the different... He'd been to Rampton, Broadmoor, Wakefield, all the top nicks. And none of them could control him. So why the Trims thought they could control him, I don't know.
Ronnie Kray got friendly with him in Wandsworth, and he used to send visitors in, give him money in, and look after him. And of course, that's how their relationship. He looked at Ronnie Kray like as a hero. Mitchell looked at him and thought he was a hero, you know. And because he wound up in Rampton for the criminal insane, and he was a handful for the prison system, and with attacking and screws and other prisoners. And I know he stabbed Bruce Reynolds in Worm Scrubs in the bathhouse, which I never forgot. I remember. Yeah, Bruce was good. He was a great pal of mine, Bruce. And I was up when I heard about that. I wasn't happy about that anyway. But then he escaped from Rampton with another prisoner, and they was on the run, and they got an axe, and they was the Axe Men. They were then, and in the newspapers. But they got captured and sent back, and then he was sent to Broadmoor for the criminal insane. So he wound up in Broadmoor. And then he escaped again from Broadmoor, and he got himself an axe again, you know, when he terrorised an old couple in there and nicked their car and their jewellery and their watch and things like that. So then he got captured again, so now he went back to Broadmoor, and then I don't know how many years, 17 years or so later, he went to Dartmoor, and of course, by this time, after all these years have gone by, they'd been in touch with him and writing to him and sending him money and stuff like that, Ronnie Kray, because he was a very generous person, Ronnie Kray. Because Ronnie, when he got out of Epsom, he kept free for 6 months, and then he got a date to go back from Epsom mental place, asylum, whatever it is there, back to Wandsworth to finish his bird and get a release date. But when you're in those asylums and places, they never give you a date because they never know when they're going to let you free. So this is what was happening with Frank Mitchell. So Ronnie, with all his connections and his political connections with these different people, Boothby and Co. and Dryburgh and all that activities that were going on, he thought he could pull a few strings. And if he got Mitchell out, he would be able to get him a release date, and if he handed himself in after 6 months and behaved himself and never got in any trouble.
The initial plan was to keep him holed up here, and various members of the Kray firm would write letters to the media highlighting his plight in the hope that he could get a release date.
But so this is how it all engineered. Ronnie's crazy idea to get him out, you know, one of his mad things.
Frankie was a very tough geezer, but he wasn't a liberty taker.
He got him out, and of course he exchanged one prison for another because he was holed up in a room. He thought he could go out and club it out and put himself on the firm and go and do all sorts of villainy with the twins and be their right-hand man, and, you know, in his mentality. And of course he couldn't do none of those things. All he could do was exchange one prison for another, really.
Unfortunately, Mitchell, who was an absolutely huge man, had a lot of demands. He wanted a woman. The Krays brought him a woman. He wanted food, ridiculous amounts. They were bringing him food, alcohol.
So they did everything to keep him quiet, got him an hostess and some sex and things like that. And tried their best to keep him sweet, and then the idea was to smuggle him out abroad, you know, to get him to Australia or Spain or somewhere where he could live the rest of his life, not in a happy, or get him in the country, and he would never be able to survive here in England, you know, but get him out of the country might have been all right. And I had the facilities to do that because I'd got people out of the country previous, you know, train robbers out of the country. I managed to do that, you know. He got too much for them. I mean, they couldn't handle him. They was fucking had minders around there looking after him 24/7.
He's in a flat in Barking?
Yeah, yeah. But he came uncontrollable. I mean, he was arm wrestling with them, and he was picking them up by the belts and holding them above his head. He was picking up throwing pianos up in the air and show him how strong he was, and then he'd have a fuck, and then he would do 100 press-ups, you know, afterwards. The bird was all right to start with because he's a handsome man, a good figure, a physique, but now that you realise what he really is like, you know.
Eventually he started saying, I want to get out, I want to go and walk around the streets, and he became an absolute headache for the twins. So, as the twins did, they decided any sort of headache, they were going to kill him.
And Ronnie was in hiding himself because he was wanted because there was something about him, got him wired up with a police officer who was demanding money, and he was asked to go and give evidence against him and get in a dock and point a finger, and he could never do that. Nobody would, in the criminal world, with any respect, would go and do that. So he was on the missing himself, so he couldn't go round and see him. But so they had minders looking after him day and night, and they was all terrified and shit scared of him, and they was complaining all the time, and so they got me over, asked me to come over, and I went to see Reggie and Charlie, and they said, can you get us out of trouble here and help us? And they had rings under their eyes, and he threatened to go round and take their mother hostage, and he knew what to blame and he would take 6 coppers with him. If it was the police turned up, he would shoot his way out and take 6 coppers with him. This was what he was saying, and it turns out that one of the minders, Billy Exley, wouldn't go and look after him without being tooled up with a shooter, right? So they give him a shooter, and while he's asleep in the night, Mitchell is crept around and searched his pocket, and he spotted the gun, and he took the gun, and he's tapped him on the chin with it, woke him up with it in the morning, and said, look what I found, you know. So he's got the shooter now. Now he's a fucking lunatic. He's already got a big hunting knife. Well, but that wasn't so bad as having a shooter with like 6 or 7 bullets, whatever it was. So this is where he keeps talking about shooting 6 coppers, you see.
The Krays had always been keen to learn how Foreman had managed to dispose of Ginger Mark's body, because back in the 1960s, the police worked largely on the assumption that if there wasn't a body, there hadn't been a murder. However, Foreman refused to disclose his darkest secret, a decision which led to him being called upon to personally dispose of bodies on more than one occasion.
So now they're really worried now. So now they've got to get some help from somewhere, and they come to me again. So I'll go over and see him, and so I made arrangements to pick him up and take him out of the country, you know, take him away down the country. And this is what happened.
On the night of Christmas Eve 1966, Albert Donoghue was in the flat with Frank, and some men came to the door and said, you know, we're going to take you to see the twins. The girl will have to stay here, but you come with us. So Albert walked out of the flat with Frank. He said goodbye to the girl, and they went out through that door into the street.
We had to separate Mitchell from the girl. And he wouldn't trust anyone else, only me, because I got him off the moor. So he trusted me. So my job was to get him out of the house, away from the girl. So I said to him, look, what we do, we go and spend a few weeks with Ronnie and Christmas, But you know what he's like, he won't have a woman around him. So I said, we'll let her follow on. We'll go on ahead and let her follow on. I said, then if we get stopped, it's every man for his circle, but she won't be involved. So he liked the idea of that.
After leaving the flat, Albert Donoghue and Frank Mitchell walked around the corner to Ladysmith Avenue.
As we turned into the main road, there's a young, skinny young copper come walking towards us, beat copper. I thought, for fuck's sake, don't say. Yeah, you'd expect to say, excuse me, sir, because his photo was over all the papers and on the television and everything. I thought he'd going to say, excuse me, sir, are you Mr. Mitchell? He'd have fucking slaughtered him. I broke him 10 seconds beside me, so I said, come, Frank, turn it in. We went round the corner and there was the van.
Parked on the curbside was an old commerce-style van. The back doors were open and inside sat Freddie Foreman and another man named Alfie Gerard. They motioned for Mitchell to get into the vehicle and he sat on the wheel casing.
And that's when I started to realise there's something funny happening here. So, but now the guy comes out the passenger seat, goes round the back and slams the door. Then he comes back and he gets in the passenger seat and slams that door. And I didn't know till later that that was the signal. That they were all settled and the guns opened up right behind me. Gerard was here next to me.
At 8:30 at night, a fella called Donoghue brought him out and walked him round and put him in the back, climbed in the van with him, and he should have never climbed in the van, but he did.
He had a revolver. Foreman was the other side of him with an automatic. So I'm thinking, well, a revolver's got maximum 6 rounds. Automatic, anything up to 20.
The people in the flat heard the gunshots going off, you know, they heard the shots going off. So it was car backfiring and all that, and the girl panicked, and they panicked, and everybody panicked.
But the guns opened up, pow, 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 pow. And poor old Frank, he went down, his knees doubled underneath it, he was lying back. And they were still popping them into him. I estimate there must have been at least 12 shots.
But the twins wanted him out, didn't they? And they got him out. And look what they done to him.
And he put his gun behind his ear and pow. That was it. And they took off. Got to Barker and I said, drop me here. So they opened the back up and I got out. Because to me it was logical. I'm the piggy in the middle. I'm South London firm, East London firm. I'm the piggy in the middle. I should have gone logically, you know. And I'm walking away from the van. I thought definitely going to get one. Then I went back to the flat. We all wiped it down. A wet cloth and a dry cloth, wet and dry right through every surface. And they was all saying, we heard the bangs. What did you do to him? I said, shut up about bangs. It was car backfire. Anyway, the girl was getting a bit excited. And I phoned Reggie and said, that dog won. She said, I said, the dog is dead, but I said, the dog won. That was to tell Reggie that Mitchell was off the plot, you know.
The phone call went through and Reggie Kray said, Donoghue said that dog has won, you know, which was to say that everything was okay, you know. That was the sort of the code message.
So he said, well, bring her up to Lederman's flat. Old Sammy Lederman had a little flat up in Whitechapel. So I took her up, I said, listen, he's going to ask you a few questions. Whatever you do, don't start saying bang. Don't say bang at all. Don't even mention the word bang. I said, otherwise you go fucking swimming. I said, the river's just round the corner, you'll go swimming. So, no bangs. Anyway, we got in the flat, she went in the back room with Reggie. When she came out, she was smiling, so I knew she'd passed the interviews. Poor little cat. Her mind was gone. She said to me, because Connie was sitting in the passenger seat and he just kept laughing. And I don't know why. She says, when it's my turn, will you do it? She said, because I think you'll do it quick.
At least 12 shots were fired before the van drove off. Frank Mitchell has never been seen since. Mitchell's mistress was not the only female who was terrified of Reggie Kray. His wife Frances was no longer the starry-eyed young girl. She was Reggie Kray's missus, his property. The pressures this caused led to rows between the couple, which became hideously abusive. Eventually Frances had packed her bags and returned to her parents' home. In the summer of 1967, Reggie and his wife were reunited. On the 6th of June, the couple booked a holiday to Ibiza. 2 days later, Frances was found dead in her bed. She was just 23 years old.
I think the person that murdered Frances, and I'm sorry to say this, but categorizing the times that I've spent with her, and this will be a shock to everybody, but it was a no-nonsense effort because Frances got pregnant. Nobody knows that, but I do. She had what they called bulimia and was a very manic depressive. She didn't like Ronnie in any way, shape or form. But I think maybe the mother had something to do with Frances's death. Not Reggie, he loved her too much. Ronnie tolerated her because it kept him stable.
She was timid, vulnerable, she was on medication. She had mental issues, but Mrs. Kray could never have treated her badly. And as for this ridiculous notion that Ronnie had anything to do with her death, I would dispute that to my dying day, because although he didn't like her, he would never have harmed her in any way because Reggie would never have forgiven him. That's when they would have broke, and they could never be broken in half, those two.
But I do think that Frances was a suspicious death, but I don't think Violet Kray liked Frances whatsoever. She was jealous of her because she was losing one of her babies. And they were going out more. They were going to the seaside, they went to Spain. Ronnie wouldn't let him go on his own because he was frightened she might take him away. He was jealous. He was so, so jealous of her. The only thing he loved, which is something I wouldn't call as a pet, maybe people that love these sort of reptiles do, is when Ronnie had a snake. In my summing up on that, having a snake is what sort of thing the devil would have around his feet. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't think Ronnie would have killed his wife.
When she committed suicide, I mean, we saw a completely different Reg. He was untidy, unshaven, which was totally, you know, the opposite to what they really were. He was drunk. He'd come in very drunk. She'd tell me, Violet, that he came in 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, stumbling in, but hadn't gone even out smart, hadn't put a clean shirt on, totally different. He was devastated. He really, really loved her. And I think if he could have broken away from Ronnie, they may have moved out of London, maybe had a good life, maybe got, you know, had a couple of kids. He might have been a different person.
The death of his wife Frances undoubtedly had a devastating effect upon Reggie. Everybody who knew him says that he became a dishevelled drunk. The Kray empire had begun to crumble. 4 months after Frances's death, Reggie stabbed a man to death in a drunken rage.
A couple of weeks before the McVitie business, McVitie, me and Reggie were in the restaurant in the Regency having supper together. Now, if there'd been any aggravation, I'd have smelt it, you know. Nothing, not a thing. Then, but Ronnie was always screaming at Reggie, "It's your turn, you coward, you. Why don't you do your, I don't mind."
On the night after the funeral, he was in the Regency having a drink, getting rotten drunk, and Jack the Hat came round to shoot any one of the Kray brothers. And I know he's on pilled up, he was always on speed and stuff and had too much drink, but he went round to shoot Reggie Kray, Ronnie Kray or Charlie, or any one of them. and they had a bit of an argument on the door, and the two doormen took the shotgun off him, and the shotgun went off and blew a hole in the door.
He came in the Regency one night, supposed to have had a shotgun. He said, "Is any of the firm in the old blow the fuckers away?" I was down in the, we had an afters bar right down in the basement, behind upholstered doors and everything. Couldn't hear a sound in there. I said to Johnny Barry, "I'll go up." He said, "No, don't." He said, "He's got a shirt on, he's out of his head." He said, "I'll get rid of him." Anyway, he went.
Well, Reggie was just sitting inside there, up at the bar, rotten drunk at the time. So he had a very narrow escape then. And so for me, that a week later, they found out what happened, and that's the reason they murdered Jack the Hat. Well, they give him money to go and shoot this guy, Leslie Payne, a fella called Payne, who worked for them. He turned out wrong, and he was the first one to make statements to the police, because they sent Jack round to shoot him, Jack the Hat. They give him money to go and shoot him, and he never did it. He took the money and drank it all and bought pills with it, or whatever he did with it, but he never did what he was supposed to do.
The twins were clearly upset with McVitie. So on October the 29th, 1967, they invited him to this house where there was it was just a local house party going on. And prior to his arrival, the twins turned up, told the host to get rid of all the guests. They waited down in the room in the basement, and a couple of other members of their firm were on the stairs. McVitie arrived, he was very drunk, been popping pills all night, so wasn't really, with it.
The Lambriano brothers took him to this party, and when they got him down there, and there was they just fucking challenged him and finished up stabbing him to death.
When he was in the front room, Ronnie Kray grabbed hold of him, and Reggie Kray was meant to shoot him, but the gun he had was duff, messed it up like most things they did. And Ronnie got him in a bear hug, and he was saying to Reggie, do him, I've done mine, you do yours.
Bender got a knife from the kitchen, one of them fucking kitchen carving knives, and he just started stabbing it in the head, the face, stomach, everywhere.
So Reg was given a large kitchen knife by a guy called Ronnie Bender, and he stuck that in McVitie's throat and then started stabbing him in the chest. McVitie fell to the floor, and Reggie continued stabbing him. And in the end, he impaled him on the floor by sticking the knife through his throat into the floorboards.
Reggie stabbed him to death. Ronnie was holding him, and this guy, Ronnie Hart, their cousin, was involved in it all, stabbing him and holding him, and it was a messy, really messy job, what they did of him anyway. It took a long time to kill him, apparently. It was a bad scene.
Chris Lambriano had run onto the stairs, was sitting on the stairs crying. His brother Tony had run up the stairs and hid in the child's bedroom. When the Krays had finished murdering McVitie, Reggie said to him, clean that up, and walked out with his brother Ronnie. So the two Lambriano brothers and a couple of other sort of hangers-on were told, scrub the floors, get rid of all the blood. Following the murder, Jack McVitie's body was loaded into Tony Lambriano's vehicle. It was brought here to this street in Rotherhithe and left outside St Mary's Church. The following morning, they contacted Freddie Foreman and asked him to deal with it.
Well, they took him across and dumped him right on my fucking doorstep, round the corner from my pub, and left him there in the back of a car, covered up in a bed, in a fucking candlewick bedspread on the back seat of the car. I mean, what a thing to do, And there was right outside the church where there'd been a wedding take place, And this is what they did. After that incident, there was no reporting there, everyone was missing. He was missing, Jack was missing, Mitchell was missing, Marks was missing. So it was, they was all pointing the finger at me all the time, And of course, there was You can imagine what was going on you know, at Scotland Yard and places like that.
Every single aspect of the Krays' lives are surrounded by conspiracy theories and myths. In the late 1960s, this flyover was being constructed, and many believe that the bodies of Jack the Hat, Frank Mitchell and Ginger Marks ended up being buried here beneath the foundations.
Freddie Foreman has already admitted what he did. Remember, I was very friendly with the Lambriano brothers, so I know the real story of what happened to Jack the Hat. Tony Lambriano did drive the body away with his brother behind him in another car, all the way to South London, parked outside 3, 4 o'clock in the morning outside a little church. Fred was told to pick it up, take it away, and he always claims that went to sea, which is quite feasible to me. I've heard all the bow flyover stories and buried in different graves. There was a man that could melt down stuff, the smelter. I think he took care of another 2 bodies. But I do know the Jack the Hat story, the being out to sea, was the correct one. And they've told me that, the twins and who drove him there.
They used to have a pole. We had couple of breakers yards. You had one over the wall.
Oh, that's right. You did
and you
tell
had
me.
one at Dartford. He used to break lorries up, smelt Ellie, and he had a big aluminium smelt. And what he used to do, he used to have an old chest freezer. He used to put them in there.
Freeze them up.
Then he'd cut them up and put them in the smelt.
No blood once
And if there's any bones left, we used to crush them all up and then go and throw them in the river. And that's how we disposed of the bodies.
Only a small number of Freddie Foreman's closest confidants know what really happened to the bodies of Marks, Mitchell and McVitie. Even the Krays were not privy to such sensitive information. Despite the no body, no murder assumption that the police had worked under, they arrested the Kray brothers and their associates on the 8th of May 1968. Several gang members gave evidence against the twins after they were told they would have to take the blame for the murders. Ron and Reg Kray were eventually sentenced to life imprisonment with a recommendation that they serve at least 30 years. Charlie Kray and Freddie Foreman were both in prison for 10 years for being accessories in Jack McVitie's murder.
You know why I went on the Kray case? Ronnie Kray burnt me in 1963. This is 1968. What? You don't grass, right? But I was in prison and they got a letter smuggled into me. I think it's from one of the bent screws. If we had been talking to the old Bill, we're going to shoot your 2 kids and your wife.
Anyway, I went on a solicitor's visit. Now it's me and the 3 Krays sitting there. And this bent brief Manny Freddie. All of a sudden Freddie says, I'll go and get another chair. Again, I didn't think at the time. We went and got a chair. We brought it back. There's nowhere to put it because we were all sitting down anyway.
Yeah.
You know? What, didn't need another chair. And that's when Ronnie said, he's got an idea. He said, we're going to get Ronnie out to stand up for McVitie. We're going to get Scotch Jack to stand up for Cornell. We want you to stand up for Mitchell. I said, no, I'm not doing that. Poor way he fucking looked at me. He wouldn't have needed it at all. I would have dropped dead on the spot the way he looked at me. He thought, what he thought was that we were frightened, still frightened of him, you know. We were still frightened of the Krays, but it was me, Ronnie Hart and Jack Dixon, Scotch Jack. We weren't frightened of him. So that was when my mother came to visit me with my youngest son, who was a baby at the time. And I slipped in this little note. Tell Nip, get to Nipper Reed from Bow Street, tell him if he wants the business, come and see me. And he came in.
I sat next to Violet Kray at the trial on a couple of occasions, and as the witnesses were going into the box and informing on them now that they were incarcerated, Nipper Reed had got to the witnesses and they were all informing. she was turning to me and saying, why are these people telling these lies? These people have sat in my house. They've drunk my tea, ate my sandwiches. They've been looked after by the twins. They've been bought suits and cars and watches. Why are they doing this? She totally believed that it was all lies, that they'd been got at by the police to put the 2 boys away, or 3 boys away, I should say, but particularly the twins. And she just didn't believe it till the very, very last day. Even when they were sentenced to that, she just didn't believe what they did.
He said, why are you doing this? I said, because I'm sick of all this shit and the nonsense. I said, I just want to get rid of it all. And there was no deal, Dad, there was no deal. People said, you had a deal. No deal. When we went in the court was buzzing, and my brief said to me, I said, what's happening? He said, don't know, nothing's happened yet. He said, do you want to retract anything you've said? I said, no, just go, get on with it. So we went in, and good old judge, and he says, my barrister came in late, but then he started going on, you know, they go on, these barristers. But the judge said to him, Mr. Edwards, he said, you're leaning rather heavily on an open door. He said, the judge's way of saying, shut up, you know, it's all been done. So he sat down, and then he said, right, take them down. It was all in this specially built dock. And the screws took them down. And then, we all went in ourselves. Then the next thing, the doors opened, and the screw and the two coppers off the Sweeney said, come on. And we went and stood at the bottom of the stairs, and the judge was peeling up the sentences. Ronald Kray, society has earned the right to arrest from your activity. You'll go to prison for a minimum of 30 years. Reginald Kray saying, well, Donoghue, 2 years. I was shocked myself. The screws and the coppers was arguing about how much I had left to do, because I'd been on remand for 9 months. Yeah. Anyway, it worked out I had about 6 months left to do. But then, Callahan was sick at the time, and for some reason, Nipperee come to see me at Maidstone. Nick, he says, we've got a result for you. He said, you've got another 3 months knocked off the end of your sentence. I didn't hardly do that. I've done about 6 months time in the zoo, you know. I was well pleased.
Well, at first when they were sentenced, he was never treated for this paranoid schizophrenia. So of course he went to an ordinary prison, Ronnie Kray, which should never have happened. He should have been treated as insane, which he was, but could be okay on medication. And Mrs. Kray used to treat him with medication. She'd go and get the pills and keep him quiet, and that was fine until he got outside. But once you're in prison, I mean, you've really got to be assessed by psychiatrists, and that was never known for the first year or two. He should have really gone straight to Broadmoor, where he could be treated. They were fine until he got to Broadmoor, and then he wanted to live exactly inside as he'd lived outside. But of course, lots of people were jumping on bandwagons then, as everybody knows. The T-shirts came out, the mugs with their names on them, pens. Oh my God, as you say, scaffolding, vans had their pictures on, walls, you know, guys had Kray hats on up the top of scaffold. I've never seen anything like it. But then you see, then people started writing to them in prison, saying, can I visit? And only family and close family could visit for the first few years. And eventually, when I wanted to go to visit, I had to be vetted by the Home Office, because they were Category A. And a guy came to see me in my house. I was living in Chigwell, from the Home Office, asking me, who lives with you, you know, your husband, who's the little boy? I said, my son. What do you do for a living? I said, I'm a model. But it was a really good assessment before I could even go and visit them. And then I must have visited 9 prisons with Reggie, and eventually was vetted to go to Broadmoor. And when I saw him in Broadmoor, incredible. It's in a big school hall with a wooden floor. Everybody has a visit. You're sitting there at like 2 o'clock, 10 past, I'm thinking, going like that to the guards. Where is he? Oh, he's been getting ready since 11 o'clock. And this is at 2:15. The jangle of the keys, and the guard would bring him in. You'd think he was a Harley Street psychiatrist. Beautiful Italian silk suit, silk white shirt, double R, cufflinks in gold, the beautiful Rolex watch, shoes you could have put your makeup on in, that shiny, absolutely, horn-rimmed glasses, which he changed every year. I used to have to take a tailor in there every year to measure him up for suits. Nobody could believe it.
I met the Krays during the 1980s. I had been trying to raise money for a 10-year-old boy who had suffered horrific injuries after being hit by a car. The Krays offered to help me, and over the next few years we became friends. I would visit them regularly and send in things they needed. In return, Reggie helped me to secure a job. You know, I was, of course, grateful to both the twins, really. They'd helped me get a job at Raquel's in Basildon. And they'd helped me with this young boy, James Fallon, who sadly died. And so I did feel a bit indebted to him. And honestly, I felt a bit sorry for him. You know, two guys doing 30 years, when the going rate for murder in them days was 15. So I felt they had been treated harshly. So if they asked me to do them a favour, you know, I would. And at the time, I was involved in criminality, and some of those favours, including bashing people. I can remember when Tony Lambriano, one of the Kray firm, brought out a book. Ronnie was absolutely incensed because he said that Lambriano had grassed him up. So he asked us to go around and not just beat him up, but break every bone in his body, do this, just ridiculous stuff. When the Kray movie came out, the original Kray movie, Roger Daltrey apparently had bought the rights to the Kray story, and he'd sold them on to a film company, and Daltrey had made a lot of money out of it, according to Reggie. So Reggie said, you know, he's got our money, we want some of our money back. So he said to me, I want you to go to Roger Daltrey's fish farm in Suffolk, I think it was, or Sussex, sorry, with a guy called James Campbell, a Scottish guy, and basically rough him up and get the money off him. But I'd been a lifelong Who fan, and felt quite, you know, thought it was a bit ridiculous, really. So rather than go to Roger Daltrey's house and threaten him and do the things we'd been asked to do, someone made a phone call to him, let him know that the twins weren't happy with what had happened. And I don't think he was too bothered, to be honest. You know, two men doing 30 years, one was a raving lunatic, the other was just had lost touch with reality, in my opinion, because he surrounded themselves with complete fantasists. I had an image of the Krays as these sort of mafioso type people, but when you got to know them, they were like quite seedy, really. I was on a visit one day, one of the last visits I had with Reggie, and I went there as a young lad. He's about 16, 17, really effeminate type kid, and Reggie was all girly around him, and I thought, I don't like this. I don't want it. Do you know what I mean? And I'll see you next time. And I thought, I'm never going to see you again. I know for a fact I'm never going to see you again, because I don't want to be part of this. It's just, it's not right. You know, it's fucking wrong on every level. The Krays did their sorry best to live out their lives in prison, whilst clinging to a reputation that was being diluted by every embarrassing episode that was being carried out by their minions. The press began to humiliate the twins, and many former firm members began to publicly ridicule them. Ronnie, whose name meant everything to him, was spared the worst of the criticism when he passed away in March 1995.
I'd been to Broadmoor about 2 weeks before he died, and he looked very pale and a little bit dishevelled, which was very unusual. And I asked him, I said, have you changed your medication? And he said, yeah, they've got me on some other pills. That was quite a funny day, actually, because he said, I don't even know why I'm still in this place. He said, they're all mad in here. And I turned around and I said, you know, I was with Jack Lee and I was with Tony Lambriano. I said, but Ronnie, you are mad. And it all went silent, you know. And he said, good job you're a woman. In other words, if a man had said that, I'd have been no more. And then I was at home when I literally heard it on the news. And I spoke to several people in the East End. They said, yeah, it's true. And then I was phoned by Reggie the following day saying, I want you to do the seating in the church. He's going to be buried like he always wants to, like a king.
The Krays had made many enemies during their reign, and now Ronnie was dead, Reggie was feeling vulnerable. Fearing attack, he asked me and another man to protect him at his brother's funeral.
Will you allow me to go with you? Or... No, you won't be able to go with me, but I tell you what I want you to do. I'm asking you and Dave Courtney to be close by me. Okay, yeah. You know? Yeah. If you don't mind. And I'll discuss it with you when I see you Monday. Okay. Dave will be here as well, eh? All right. Yeah, but I'd like you to be there with a couple of people. Okay, then I'll bring you. What I'd like you to do is be close to me and Charlie, and you keep your eyes open so we can concentrate on the service. Okay. Stick close to me and watch anyone with dodgy characters. I know what you mean then. There's always a nutcase. I'm not worried, but I don't want to spoil the funeral, eh? No, I know. And I'll see you tomorrow.
There were 26 limos. There's the famous picture of the 26 limos going over the Bow flyover. Quite a sad day for Reggie because he wasn't allowed to go into a funeral car with his brother, Charlie. He had to travel behind the horses with the carriage in a prison van, handcuffed in the church. We did ask as soon as he arrived, could he just be unhandcuffed for the service? No, they said, like as if he was going to escape and stop his parole or pay disrespect to his twin brother. And he did the whole thing with dignity.
As Reggie Kray came to the end of his 30-year sentence, his brother Charlie was arrested for conspiracy to supply £39 million worth of cocaine. Many believed it was in fact a conspiracy engineered by the authorities to ensure that all three Kray brothers died in jail.
Charlie, I'd been to Durham just before he was put into Parkhurst. I'd been to Durham, and he came out in the orange vest, being a Category A prisoner. And I'd never seen Charlie Kray ever white. Always had that tan, again, always immaculate. And he came out in Durham like white, looking ill. He said he'd had swollen ankles and swollen feet. They had done nothing. They hadn't even called a doctor. The next thing we knew, he'd been transferred to Parkhurst. There was no reason for that whatsoever. This man was over 70. He was ill. Why put him on a freezing cold island? It was because the 30 years of Reggie was nearly up. He should have been released after serving his 30 years that he'd been sentenced to. They didn't want two Krays on the street. And I always say the whole sentences were political sentences, but that was a dreadfully sad and probably cruel thing to do to Charlie.
Charlie, to me, was... his name killed Charlie. If he wasn't called Kray, he'd still be alive today. But his name killed Charlie.
Charlie was just a friend with everyone. He was a charmer, a real charming man, and a nice man to be with. He respected everyone, he respected all the staff, being a waiter, a glass collector, bar staff. His manners were impeccable. And he got a bit of pride and a bit of dignity about him.
In August 2000, Reggie Kray was diagnosed with terminal cancer. He had served 32 years, and so the Home Secretary granted him compassionate parole. He never did get to walk the streets of the East End again, where he and his twin had once ruled. Reggie was transferred to a hotel in Norwich. He couldn't afford to pay for the room, and so a friend footed the bill. On his deathbed, he confessed to another murder. Although he did not name the victim, Nipper Reid, the detective who investigated the Krays, later confirmed that the victim was Mad Teddy Smith. Smith was a psychopathic homosexual, rumoured to have had affairs with Ronnie Kray and Tom Dryburgh, the former Labour MP. Smith disappeared in 1967 after an argument with the Krays. No doubt he ended up with Marks, Mitchell and McVitie. On the 1st of October 2000, Reggie died in his sleep. 10 days later, he was laid to rest with his twin brother Ronnie.
Reggie, I say, was the saddest funeral, because having married once I'd refused my 3 proposals from him, he married a lady called Roberta. She was with him 4 years, I think it was. She met him in Maidstone. I took her to Maidstone, actually, introduced her. She got on very well with him, and eventually they married. But she changed the whole sequence, which she was allowed to do because she was the widow. She changed the pallbearers, which would upset people like Freddie Foreman, one of the Nash brothers from Highbury, Teddy Dennis. People that would carry the other 2 brothers were not allowed to carry Reggie, but that was her right. When I phoned her up and said why, she said, I don't want to be associated with these people. Reggie's pulled away from that in the last 2 years of his life. He was looking forward to release. He was looking forward to working with young offenders, which I know was true, because I'd set up a few things ready for him when he came out. She just changed, and therefore it was sad, because all the old school, his old friends, such as Frank Fraser and Fred, they were just sort of dismissed to a pew in the church. And it angered a lot of people. Hence, we had 2 wakes. She took her people to one pub, and our people went to another pub, which has never been done in any other Kray funeral. A lot of people that visited Reggie were given short, sharp lessons, like, do you want to spend your life like me in here? Like, look what I could have done. He regretted at the end of his life and told me so on several occasions. Ronnie never regretted. He never apologised. He never reformed.
Ronnie Kray may not have had any regrets, but had he known the truth about those he considered to be his most trusted friends, he may well have had a lot of regret. That is because those that he championed as loyal and trustworthy until the day he died were in fact conspiring to murder him and his twin shortly before they were arrested.
He was getting out of control, Ronnie. He was going so far that he couldn't care less. He thought he was untouchable.
I was asked to go over again to see them, and I walked into this bungalow, and there was a fella called Charlie Clark. He was an old cat burglar from years ago, and when I walked in there was a terrible atmosphere, and all the rest of the firm are sitting there, fucking worried out their life. And there's Ronnie Kray pacing up and down in his braces with a cigarette, which is the light, one after the other, and puffing away, marching up like a caged tiger or a lion in a cage, you know. I said, what you got me here for? What's the problem, you know? So he said, it's that Billy Gentry. He said, I'm gonna, you know, I'll get him. I've sent the firm out to pick him up and bring him back. He's gonna do him. I said, what for? What's Billy Gentry done? You know, he's upset me. He did this. I said, well, you can't fucking do these things. I said, what are you doing? I said, what you got me here for? I can't help you out. You know, I'm not going to help you out in this situation. Billy Gentry's a nice guy. He's a good fella. I've known him for fucking years. I've done loads of bird with him. Every time I went in a nick, he seemed to be there. You know, Bill. He's a nice kid. Anyway, all the rest of them, all the committee, they sent out like 4 fellas to go and pick him up and bring him back so that Ronnie can fucking shoot him. You know, or kill him, whatever way he was going to do it. And I said, no, I'm so sorry. I said, I can't have it. I said, I'm talking him out of it. I said, I ain't got any facilities to handle this situation anyway. I said, it can't be done. And I forget about it, Ron, and you know, calm down. And of course, I've just got him round to that, where he accepted the fact that he wasn't going to, you know, go through with it. And the fucking doorbell rings, doesn't it? They're back, aren't they? They've come back. I said, all right, let me go. I went down the passage to get to the door first, opened the door, and if Bill Gentry's there, I'm going to push him and say, now fucking leg it, you run, you know, just go. But they was there, it was Donoghue and another couple of people, and they come back and they winked at me, they gave me a wink, they went, we couldn't find him, we looked everywhere, we couldn't go into the front, and then Ronnie Krays, did you go down the Widows, did you go down there, where did you look there and look for him and everything? And I thought, so what's he fucking raving mad here, you know? And that was a sort of a very worrying situation then.
When Ronnie Krays sat in the car, he always wanted to sit in the passenger seat. So we just sort of larking about, we said, it'd be so easy to just sit behind him, and when you find a nice corner, pop him in the back of the head and chuck him out and let him roll down the bank or something. It would have been so easy.
He wasn't a colonel, he wasn't a boss, he wasn't a leader of men. He was a mass murderer. He enjoyed, like a serial killer, he enjoyed what he did. He got a kick out of it.
The thing would have been much better if they fucking ironed out the two twins earlier, and it saved a lot of trouble, and a lot of people wouldn't have gone to prison, and it saved 250 years being dished out at a later date, you know, and people have been alive today. That was my thoughts, and several other people who was connected with me. That was our thought, you know, because they were a danger to everybody and everybody else, and they was out of control. I mean, with people like that topped it, the Billy Gentry thing, you know, when they that particular incident. Well, when I reported back to my pals what had happened that night, you know, there's only one thing for it. That's in the Simpsons in the Strand. That took place. Discussion.
I know he's a legend today. I'm wrong to say that because a lot of people admire the Krays. But as far as I'm concerned, no, I don't. They weren't properly organised. There was no legions. There was nothing. There was no control, money laundering, none of that. It was all, I'm who I am and you have to take it or leave it. The rank was all wrong.
I'm glad they're 6 foot under the best place they can be. Yeah. They were two horrible bastards. You don't hurt your own, but they hurt anybody then. People feared the Krays. And do you know why they only talk to them when they see them in the market? Because they were terrified of them.
People who say the lovely boys didn't know them.
They were bloody animals.
Well, if you didn't fear him, you either was very brave or stupid, or you were telling lies.
Physical harm.
You were telling lies if you said you never feared them.
Why?
Because they were really frightening if you really knew them.
I thought they should be ironed out, to be honest.
You thought the Krays should have been shot?
The two of them, yeah.
Why did you think?
Because they was dangerous to everybody, and if they hadn't been arrested when they were, that's what would have happened.
Was that?
Yeah.
That
was on the cards, yeah.
Long after their deaths, the Krays are revered by misguided youngsters from a generation that wasn't even born when the twins took over the East End of London. More than 32 books and a succession of films have chronicled their reign, and in some cases glorified it. I personally fail to see any glamour in the sexual abuse of young men, the exploitation of innocent members of the public, and the murder of fathers and husbands, simply because you have the means to dispose of their bodies, and in doing so play God. The deranged and dysfunctional Kray brothers will undoubtedly be remembered for many years to come, but nobody should forget the misery their crimes caused to so many.